All right, I think we can go ahead and get started. All right, well, let me go ahead and kick this off. So good evening, everyone. My name is Faith Leach, and I am the Interim Executive Director of the Mayor's Office of Children and Family Success. I want to start off by thanking each and every one of you for joining us for this evening's discussion on the Board of School Commissioners application process. And I also want to take a second to acknowledge some folks that you're going to be hearing from tonight. So a special thank you to our two school board commissioners, Commissioner Roberts and Commissioner Griffin. Thank you so much for joining us. Really looking forward to hearing the discussion with our school board members a little bit later on in the agenda. Also want to send a very special thank you to our school board executive officer, Christian Grant, who you're going to hear from shortly. And many thanks to my team over at the Mayor's Office of Children and Family Success, especially Allie Smith, for all of your work in supporting this process. So I'm going to give a quick overview of the purpose of tonight's discussion, and I'm going to spend some time just walking us through the agenda. We have a lot to accomplish in a short amount of time, so I do want to move pretty quickly. But as Allie mentioned earlier, if you have questions, we are here to answer your questions. Please keep them at pretty high level about the application process, or if you have quick questions about the overview that Christian provides, feel free to put them inside the chat throughout today's discussion, and we'll be sure to monitor that chat so we can follow up on any of your questions that you all put forward. So the purpose of tonight's information session is to provide an opportunity for individuals who are interested in serving as a commissioner to learn about the role of the school board, to also get an understanding of the application process, especially what specific skills we're going to be looking for in this round. And we also want to provide an opportunity, as I mentioned, for you to ask questions of the commissioners about their experience, of Christian, who's been doing this work for a while, and or of Allie or myself, just about the overall application process. So for tonight's agenda, we're going to start off with an introduction to the Baltimore City School Board, an introduction to the Baltimore City School Board, which Christian will lead us through. We'll also spend some time going over the requirements as well as mayoral expectations of candidates. We'll talk about the selection process tonight, and then you're going to hear directly from our current commissioners on their experience on the school board. And then, as I mentioned, and I will mention over and over again, we do want to hear from you and hear some of the questions that you have related to this process. So feel free to put those questions in the chat throughout tonight's discussion. Okay. So Christian, I'm going to turn it over to you so that you can walk us through your presentation.
Thank you, Faith. And if I'm going too long or I'm boring, y'all, please let me know. Okay, let me pull it up. Okay, can everybody see it just fine? Okay, great. All right. 1 moment. Okay, awesome. Good evening, everyone. My name is Christian Gant, and I serve as Board Executive Officer for the Baltimore City School Board. In a nutshell, kind of like their Chief of Staff, and also manage the board office. Tonight, I'm going to present on the roles and responsibilities of the school board. So for starters, what is the role of the school board? So the board has full authority and jurisdiction over all educational matters in Baltimore City, and its primary responsibility is the governance of the district. Many of the roles and responsibilities are outlined in statute, in addition to the agreed upon provisions in the CEO's contract. I'm going to touch on some of these and go into further detail on others further into the presentation. So setting the vision, mission, strategic priorities, and goals for the district. I believe a vision and mission are pretty straightforward, but in regards to strategic priorities, these are the board's priorities that will guide the district's work over the next 4 years. I will go into more detail about the priorities and goals further into the presentation. Hiring and evaluating the CEO. Only the board has the authority to hire and evaluate the CEO, not the mayor or any other public official. Only the board has that authority to do that.
Excuse me, Mr. Gant. I'm not sure if it's just on my side, but it's not matching your speaking point. The
Uh-oh.
slides aren't changing.
Uh-oh.
Yeah,
Okay, let me try. Okay, thanks y'all for telling me. It looks like I need to do it.
there you go.
Oh, let me try it. Let me do something different because I don't like the way this presenter mode in here. Give me 1 second, okay? Sorry, let me try a different way.
Are there others who are not seeing the slides?
Oh, they're down now. I need to re.
Oh, okay. Okay. Got it. There we go.
All right, let's try this. Okay, is that better?
I see slide number 2.
Yep. Okay? Great. I think. Can everybody see it now?
Yes.
Okay. Awesome. All right. I'm going to continue. And thank you all. So adoption and overseeing the annual budget. The board only the board can approve the budget for the annual budget for city schools. The board also receives detailed reports throughout the year on district finances, in addition to the public budget presentations that are presented by staff in board meetings. Approved district curriculum. Curriculum comes before board approval on a 6-year cycle. The board approves different subject areas each year. And this year's curricula are high school health and PE and high school language arts. In the previous years, it was social studies. So the board approves the curriculum that our students are learning in schools. Approving bargaining unit contracts. So only the board has responsibility for final approval of any contracts. The CEO's contract designates her as the board's chief negotiator, which is pretty standard across the board for large urban school districts. The board's practice has been that the CEO informs the board when negotiations are beginning, keeps the board informed of the status throughout, and seeks feedback on significant policy proposals in the negotiations. I want to reemphasize, though, that only the board can approve any final bargaining unit contracts. Appointing certificated personnel and senior staff. All certificated personnel, such as teachers or principals, and senior staff, such as the chief financial officer or the chief academic officer, must be approved by the board. The CEO's responsibility is for vetting and nominating the personnel. Adopt and advocate for a legislative platform in the General Assembly session. The board annually adopts a legislative platform around December, which guides the priorities of staff in the upcoming General Assembly session. More often than not, the board chair is asked to testify, but sometimes other board members also testify in Annapolis on behalf of city schools. Deciding appeals of final decisions from the CEO. So final decisions of the CEO, such as an extended student suspension or employee contract non-renewal, can be appealed to the board, among other final decisions of the CEO, in which the board can either affirm, modify, or reject the CEO's modification. And I also note that certain certificated personnel can't even be fired. Only the board can even release them. The CEO doesn't have the authority to do that. It has to go before the board to also release certain certificated personnel. So the final three I'm going to present and more discuss, and I will discuss in further detail throughout the presentation. However, they are holding the district accountable for meeting goals, seeking and hearing the community's voice in decision making, and adopting policies and regulations to govern the district and guide staff work. The board is roughly similar to the Congress or a legislative branch. Think of policy making, budgeting, placing topics of conversation for hearings. These are very similar to congressional hearings. The CEO and district staff are kind of similar to an executive branch. Their role is to implement the policies passed by the board. If the board were to set a goal of 25% reading growth, for example, for our second graders, it would be up to the CEO to figure out what personnel, curriculum, procedures, and supports are needed to make that goal a reality. So a little bit about the board. Prior to 1997, city schools functioned as a department of the city of Baltimore, similar to, say, DPW. It is now its own agency, as all other school districts in the state are. And then in 1997, the city-state partnership was created by legislation, creating a new school board that at the time was jointly appointed by the mayor and governor. The purpose of the board, as outlined in the city-state partnership, is to raise the level of academic achievement of the students in the Baltimore City public school system and improve the management and administration of the public school system in Baltimore City. Legislation passed in 2017 removed the governor's role from appointing commissioners and is now the mayor's sole responsibility. So the current makeup of the board is 9 appointed members and a student member that is elected by the Associated Student Congress of Baltimore City. This December, the board will increase to 12 members with the addition of 2 elected board members that will be elected citywide. Mayoral appointed members will be able to serve a 3-year term and then be eligible for another 3-year reappointment, whereas elected members will have 4-year terms with no term limits. Our student commissioner serves a 1-year term and may be elected to serve an additional term. So quorum, which is again what the minimum needed for a thing to be considered a board meeting, is 5. So at least 5 board members must be in attendance at a meeting for the board to make any decisions. And similarly, an affirmative vote of at least 5 members of the board is required to make any decisions. The Baltimore City Board is unique in that the appointed members must fit into certain slots. And again, this only applies to appointed members. Also, let you know that board members can fulfill multiple slots. So 4 board members must have significant business administration experience, the management and running of a large business, nonprofit, or government entity. 3 board members must have a high level of knowledge and expertise concerning education. 1 board member must be a parent of an enrolled Baltimore City public school student at the time of appointment. And then finally, 1 board member must possess knowledge or experience in the education of children with disabilities, although this knowledge or experience can be derived from being the parent of a child with a disability. So next, just to put some names with faces, these are the current board members. Our chair is Jeanette A. Richardson, and she has been in that role since 2021, excuse me. And our vice chair is Ronald McFadden, who's also been in that role since 2021. So I want to touch on governance versus management, as I think this is something that can often, is not always surfaced. So a school board's role is supposed to focus on governance. That is, transferring the needs, wishes, and desires of the community in the policies that direct the community schools. Management and the day-to-day operation of the district are the CEO's responsibilities. The board's focus is on monitoring and oversight, ensuring that goals are met and that accountability is met to meet those goals. The board decides the what and the direction, whereas the CEO's job is to figure out the how in meeting the board's goals. To expand a bit on the board's role in strategic planning, I'd like to share some of the priorities and goals that the board has recently adopted. These 7 priorities here will be the board's focus throughout the 2026-2027 school year. So again, these priorities are the 7 priorities the board adopted, also incorporating community feedback as what the board wants to focus on in this time period. The district goals are grounded in the 7 priorities and derived from them, and will be how the board will be measuring the success of the priorities. So looking at these goals that the board just adopted, the board would like to see the amount of students reading on grade level double to 40%, increase the wholeness score across the district to 80%, and increase the graduation rate to 76% by the end of school year 2026-2027. The CEO's annual goals are also tied to the progress of this plan. So ideally, the CEO's annual goals will be getting us towards this, and then by the time we reach 2026, 2027, we'll have reached the goal. The board will also monitor progress towards this goal in public board meetings and committee meetings as we move forward. So what is policy? Policies are the board's written principles to govern city schools. It's the board's vision in action, and it provides structure for the day-to-day operations of the school district and a continuity from school to school. Attached to most policies are administrative regulations, with more specific direction on how to implement the policy. The board/the district's policies are listed on our website and cover a wide variety of areas, including instruction, staff relations, and school board governance. In addition, also, most of the policies have an annual compliance report requirement attached. And the compliance reports are reports to let the public and the board know if the policy is working as intended. These are also available online if anyone wants to view them. Finally, I just want to remind everyone that policies are not set in stone. If the current board decides it wants to change something that a past board did, it can at its discretion. So I'm going to review the policy development and review process. This process formally starts when the board approves the policy committee calendar at the annual business meeting each year. Except for board specific priorities or board governance policies, the CEO staff is responsible for drafting the policies and regulations in consultations with the community. The proposed policies are then presented to the board's policy committee for feedback. After that presentation, the proposed policy remains online for public feedback for a minimum of 30 years. Not 30 years, 30 days. The next step is called first reader. After staff incorporates feedback from the board and members of the public, the revised policy is presented to the full board for feedback. And similar to the policy committee meetings, staff takes that feedback and the feedback of the community and drafts a final draft. The final step in this process is a vote, typically as second reader. If there are any further changes between first reader and second reader, those typically are highlighted for the board and members of the public to see. And at times, the board has gone to a third reader if necessary. One question that frequently comes up is, how does the board hold the district accountable? And I'm going to walk through some of those various methods. Some of this information will overlap with the previous slides regarding role. So the board participation, dialogue, and questions, as well as the community feedback. What I'm really referring to is the conversation and dialogue during the board's meetings. These are, again, similar to kind of city council or congressional hearings, and this dialogue often shapes board decision-making and policy. Related to that, community feedback and public comment are also extremely important, and again, also shape dialogue, policymaking, and decision-making. Oversight and evaluation of the annual evaluation of the CEO. The board is solely responsible for this duty. In addition, the CEO has to submit annual goals for the system to the board that they are evaluated on. City schools, management of the duties of the Office of Maternal Audits. City schools has an internal auditing department that reports directly to the board. The board directs and decides which areas of district operations are being audited each year. And then the CEO and management are then held accountable for acting on these audit recommendations. So fiscal oversight. How does the board ensure that the funds are being spent in the proper or right way? Several ways. So the board receives detailed balance sheets throughout the year. Any proposed spending over $50,000 by the CEO and staff are vetted by a board committee and then the full board before they're approved. And at times, the board has amended or denied approval to these procurement items. Internal audits, as mentioned, and also an external audit, which I'm going to go into more detail later. Budget approval. Of course, the board has the final approval of the budget, in addition to other kind of fiscal policies and controls that are in place that are listed on our website under our policies. In addition to the internal audit, the budget for our external auditors, Clifton Larson Allen, is funded from the board's budget. Clifton Larson Allen does an annual fiscal audit that they share with the board with the board chair prior to discussing their findings before they're made public. So the policy setting duties and review of policy compliance reports. As I mentioned, policy is how the board governs. In addition, the board receives compliance reports detailing the implementation and effectiveness of how the policies are working. These compliance reports are also public. We already spoke about ensuring city schools' adherence with meeting the board's strategic goals, as well as the monitoring of collective bargaining negotiations and providing feedback. And the final piece on the calendar that I'll mention is the oversight and follow-up on the reports of the district ethics panel. So the ethics panel is responsible for interpreting and issuing advisory opinions or complaints inconsistent with the district's ethics code. The ethics panel is primarily supported by the board office, and similar to internal audit department, kind of lives underneath the board. The board receives all advisory opinions and complaints on a quarterly basis. And then the CEO or the board are responsible for ensuring appropriate enforcement action is taken in response to the panel's findings. There are several types of different meetings that the board participates in to handle business. First, there are the regularly scheduled public board meetings, which are typically held twice a month at 5 p.m. Public comment is permitted at this meeting. In addition to some of our recognized groups that have a standing slot at every meeting, there are 10 slots of 3 minutes each for public comment. So closed meetings, the board meets in a closed meeting before every public meeting called executive session. At this meeting, the board typically discusses legal issues, ethics panel opinions and complaints. Personnel nominations are also discussed there. Board members have questions before the public vote. The CEO has a standing section to update the board on district matters and things they need to know. And finally, there is also some board member professional development that the board participates in these these closed sessions. However, there is no policy discussion due to the Open Meetings Act in closed session. So I want to reemphasize again, the board cannot make any final decisions or discuss policy in a closed session. Board forums and hearings are used for the board to hear from members of the public on a particular topic. Board hearings are more of a format when the board just wants to listen to the members of the public, whereas board forums are more interactive, and there's more of an opportunity for members of the public to engage in dialogue with the board. And for members of the public out there, the board actually has 2 forums coming up. There's a parent guardian forum coming up in May, and a youth forum also coming up in May. So please check our website for more information if you're interested. So special meetings, the board actually held one today. These are basically public meetings held outside the normal schedule. They're typically convened just to address one issue, such as today's bond refinancing. Board work sessions. These are when the board wants to kind of dive deeper into a particular topic. The typical format is staff will present, and then the board and staff kind of have a back and forth dialogue with each other about the policy or issue to kind of come to some consensus and understanding. And finally, board committees. The board has 3 standing public committees, what I'm going to discuss in more detail. However, public comment is permitted at all 3 of these public committees. So again, the 3 public committees. Operations, staff provides updates on mainly non-instructional school matters, such as the district budget, school construction, and transportation. The teaching and learning committee is focused on academics and how our students are doing. Updates are provided on such topics including grading, English language learner updates, and English and math supports and strategies. The policy committee is the board's policy review. The policy committee, sorry, excuse me, I'm having some technical issues. Okay. The policy committee is for the board to kind of vet and review policies before they go to the full board. So board docs. Board docs is a system that we use to manage board agendas, policies, and current and past meeting materials. The link is there, and this presentation is also going to be posted on the Mayor's Office of Children and Family website if you'd like to access it. But again, all our policies, all agenda items, all things the board has voted on are housed on board docs. They're also typically shared at least 3 days before. So if we have a Tuesday meeting, usually materials are available, I'm sorry, 5 days before. So if we have a Tuesday meeting, typically the materials are available that Friday for the public, for you all, the public to view. So community engagement. As mentioned, the board does have public comment available at its various public board meetings, hearings, and forums. And I'm speaking of the budget hearings and forums. Below is a kind of example of some of the ones that the board has done or have coming up. There's a budget hearing that I also forgot to mention that's in May, where members of the public will have an opportunity to come weigh in and let the board know their thoughts and opinions on the budget that's going to be debuted. The legislative board forum is held annually. It's an opportunity for the board, the public to let the board know what it should be prioritizing in Annapolis in the upcoming legislative session. So it helps shape that legislative platform. The Youth Board Forum and the Parent Board Forum are specifically designed for the board to hear from our youth and parents. District events. Of course, the board routinely attends and participates in district events, such as the R3 listening sessions last year. Stakeholder engagement. The board regularly holds meetings with stakeholder groups, including the Baltimore Teachers Union and the Parent Community Advisory Board. And one kind of public aspect is the letters and emails that the board receives. And I just want to emphasize that these letters and emails really do help shape policy. I've seen questions or policy proposals kind of spring out of this correspondence. So absolutely very important. And also board members do have individual email addresses as well as support from the board office to receive individual correspondence. And finally, you can contact the board at board@bcps.k12.md.us with any questions or concerns. And that is the end of my presentation. So are there any questions in the chat? Okay.
Yep, it does not appear to be any questions in the chat.
I'm okay with that.
All right.
I'll take that as I explained it well enough, at least. So thank you.
If some questions come up later, we can always address them then too.
Awesome.
Okay, I'm gonna spotlight you, Faith, and bring the PowerPoint back up.
Awesome. And don't be shy. Again, like I said earlier, make sure to put your questions in the chat. This is the one time you'll have all of the folks that are on this call available to answer some of your questions. So process questions, feel free to put them in the chat throughout tonight's session. All right.
You want me to do this next part, or is that you? I'm sorry.
Oh no, can you pull up the slides?
I put it in presenting mode, but then forgot to share my screen. Okay.
Yes, no worries, no worries. So Allie's gonna, while Allie pulls up the slides, let me just take a second to thank Christian for all of your work supporting the board and for tonight's presentation. Okay. So as I mentioned at the top of the call, we'll be spending some time going deeper into the eligibility requirements as well as qualifications. And so I'm gonna spend some time doing that now, and then Allie's gonna walk us through the application process shortly. All right, so the first set of requirements are two mandatory requirements. First, it is mandatory that you are a resident of Baltimore City. So to repeat that, it is mandatory that you are a resident of Baltimore City and that you are at least 18 years of age. Additionally, as we mentioned a little bit earlier, Christian mentioned this in his presentation, we are unique, right? Our board is unique in that our members must fit into 4 distinct categories. So specifically, our board must have members with organizational management experience. So Christian mentioned this earlier. We need at least 4 commissioners who possess the knowledge or expertise concerning the successful administration of a large business, nonprofit, or a government entity. During this particular round of school board appointments, we're going to be looking for applicants who have experience in this area. So we're going to be prioritizing those applicants who have managed either a large business, a nonprofit, or like a government agency, for example. In addition, we also have to have board members who have education experience and expertise. So we need at least 3 board members that have this background. And so again, we want folks who have a strong knowledge or expertise concerning areas within the education field. Also, we must have a member that is a parent of a Baltimore public school student. And we also are looking for, or we also must have members with expertise in the education of children with disabilities. Board members with expertise in this area must possess great knowledge or have experience in the education of children with disabilities. This knowledge or experience can be derived from being the parent of a child with a disability as well. As Christian mentioned earlier, board members can meet multiple qualification categories. So it's not that you just have to have one. You may be able to fit into multiple areas. All right, so now we're going to move on to talk a little bit about mayoral considerations. All right, so Mayor Scott has made prioritizing the city's young people one of his top mayoral priorities. He's even outlined his plan to support our city's young people in his first term action plan. So we'll try to share the mayor's first term action plan in the chat at some point during tonight's discussion, but specifically look at the section on prioritizing young people, and you can see some of the actions that the mayor has committed to make over the next 3 years. And so as a part of that, as a part of the mayor's commitment to supporting our young people, he's also prioritized ensuring we have a robust process for selecting high quality candidates for the Board of School Commissioners. And so the mayor is specifically looking for candidates that have experience building partnerships and or deep community engagement experience. And so we can't do our Board of School Commissioners, they can't do this work alone. This is all about partnerships. And of course, their work is informed by the needs of the community, especially our young people. And so the mayor wants to ensure that we have commissioners who have that strong experience building partnerships and engaging with the community. He also wants to see candidates, excuse me, he also wants to see candidates with a proven commitment to Baltimore City Public Schools. So again, these are candidates that maybe they volunteer at a school or supported schools in any number of ways. And so we want to see that shine through in your application. Additionally, the mayor is going to be looking for candidates that are collaborative. He wants folks that are willing to work together to get things done. He's looking for candidates that are willing and able to embrace diverse perspectives. Also, courageous leadership. This is a huge priority for the mayor. The mayor wants to appoint school board commissioners that will put students first. I'll repeat that again. He wants to appoint school board commissioners that will put our city's young people first. He also wants candidates who won't shy away from prioritizing our young people, centering their voices and lived experiences, no matter how difficult a decision might be. And that is what courageous leadership looks like to this mayor. We'll be looking for candidates with experience with fiscal complexities and organizational oversight. Baltimore City Public Schools is a very large and complex organization. And so we need school board commissioners that can provide oversight to a large organization. And so having folks with that knowledge and or expertise will come in handy. Additionally, we're looking for folks who have knowledge of Baltimore City Public Schools. Commitment to equity. Our school system, much like other districts, has faced extraordinary challenges, especially over the past 2 years. Some of our most vulnerable young people were disproportionately impacted by the pandemic. That is why the mayor is prioritizing commissioners who are committed to equity. Additionally, the mayor is prioritizing those folks who attended Baltimore City Public Schools. We all know the mayor is a proud Mervo alum, and so he's going to be prioritizing candidates that are a product of our school system, much like he is a product of our school system, and or those who have children in our system or who have worked in the school system. Also, the mayor's prioritizing those candidates that have previous board experience and or board training, and student government and or leadership associations also count as having board experience in leadership training. And finally, the mayor is prioritizing those candidates who bring a unique perspective to the school board. All right, so that was a lot. So I'm going to pause there just to see if there are any questions.
There was one question that came up, but I answered it in the chat, but I just wanted to acknowledge it too in case others ask. And this was something I discussed with Christian earlier today. They asked, is it possible to teach in city schools and hold a board seat? And that is not allowable. You cannot be a current employee of city schools and on the board for both appointed and elected seats. Okay.
All right. Any other questions? I see another question. Can I ask why? I'm sure Christian, you can answer this one, but I'll start out by saying a conflict of interest. But Christian, if you want to expound on that.
That's all I was saying. I mean, in a nutshell, it is a conflict, right? Because you'd be deciding your own salary, policies that affect you. So, it's a conflict.
But there are current commissioners that have been Baltimore City school teachers in the past, but they're not current Baltimore City school teachers.
Absolutely. Oh yeah, absolutely. You can't be currently employed, but no prohibition on past service. Absolutely not. No.
Yep. And also, and Christian, I'm not sure if you addressed this in your presentation, but isn't there a limit on board members leaving the board and working for the public school system?
So after a board member leaves, they cannot be employed by the district for 1 year. And that can be waived, but only by a vote of the board. But no, that prohibition is in place. Yes. So we don't allow commissioners to work. The same way the same way as teachers couldn't serve, we also don't allow commissioners to serve, at least initially, on the back end for the same kind of conflictual issues.
Awesome. All right, let's see. Please clarify having a child in the system. If you don't have children but have nieces and nephews that attended, can that count? Or can you be disqualified for not having children? So not having children does not disqualify you from the school board. It is just a requirement that at least one member of the full school board be a parent of a child in the school system.
And if you were a parent that had school-aged children, but were choosing not to send them to Baltimore City Public Schools, that would not be an ideal quality for a candidate. Okay, we will move on to the next part of the agenda. And if you have other questions that come up, please keep sharing them in the chat.
Okay, are we at the Q&A?
No, we're going to go through the candidate selection process real quick. Just talk about what that. Hold on one moment. I did something with my screen. Okay, so we just want to review the process that will occur for all applicants. So the application is currently open. We plan to close it on Friday, May 6th, so that leaves it open for 1 month. Once applications close, the Mayor's Office of Children and Family Success will be doing a review of applicants to ensure one, eligibility criteria is met, and then we'll be reviewing with a rubric for the considerations and qualifications that Faith shared previously. Once we review the applicants, MOCFS will then send a recommended set of top scoring candidates to a community panel to set up interviews with them. And here on the slide, we have a list of organizations that make up the community panel. Each of these organizations sends a representative to participate in this interview process. We have the Fund for Educational Excellence, the Maryland Alliance of Public Charter Schools, PTA Council of the City, Disability Rights Maryland, the Teachers Union, the American AFSCME, Downtown Baltimore Family Alliance, well, I guess now called Baltimore Family Alliance, we should correct the name, Associated Student Congress, the Baltimore City Parent and Community Advisory Board, the Baltimore City Council Education Workforce and Youth Committee, American Civil Liberties Union, and the Baltimore City Public School Administrators and Supervisors Association. So the community panel conducts interviews with all of the candidates that we send to them, and they then recommend finalists. These finalists are scheduled to have one-on-one interviews with the mayor, and then following the mayor's interviews is when he makes his appointment decision or decisions based on the candidates that he interviewed. And then once he makes those decisions, we have the swearing in and the formal appointment, and they join the school board. Are there any questions about the candidate process? Doesn't look like there are any right now. Again, if they come up as we move on, feel free to put them in the chat. The next part of the agenda, we're going to have, Christian's going to facilitate a conversation with 2 of our current commissioners so you can learn from their experience as commissioners on the school board. So I'll go ahead and spotlight you all so you can begin that conversation.
Thank you. Thank you. Before we begin, commissioners, do you want to just maybe share a brief bio or a little bit about yourself for the audience?
Sure. Good evening, everyone, and thank you so much for joining us on this really beautiful weathered evening. You chose to be here with us this evening. My name is Commissioner Chantel Roberts. I am in year 2.5 of my first term. I was appointed November 2019 by Mayor Bernard Jack Young. I'm a Baltimore City native, graduate of Baltimore City Public Schools. I have a 3rd grader in the district that is currently on spring break. And if you hear noise in the background, that is the product of spring break. I serve on the Baltimore City School Board as the chair of the Operations Committee. I also serve on the Maryland Association of Boards of Education's Board of Directors representing Baltimore City Public Schools. And I think that's all I do, Mr. Gant. I think that is. I will pass the mic to my colleague, Commissioner Griffin.
Hey, like I said, Commissioner Griffin, I just see black, but maybe that's my teams. Can you all see Commissioner Griffin? I want to make sure we're not having technical issues.
I can see her.
Okay, I guess it's just my computer. Sorry, I just want to make sure. Okay.
Okay, I'm like, oh no, because when I joined Teams, it was showing black, and I turned my camera on and off, and then my face popped up. So
I see your Morgan State here.
Yeah, I had to rep my HBCU. This is my favorite hoodie, y'all. Some people cannot see me, apparently. Sorry, folks. I'll try turning my camera on and off after I do my introduction, just to make sure y'all can see my face. But my name is Atira Griffin. I serve on the School Board of Commissioners, and I was appointed in March of last year. So just heading into finishing out my first full year on the board, heading into going into my second, which is really cool. I am also a Baltimore City native, born and raised here in the city. I am a Baltimore City Schools graduate as well. And I also had the pleasure of teaching in Baltimore City Public Schools and being a school administrator, which is a lot of fun. I worked with middle school and high school girls at an all-girl public charter school here in Baltimore for about 5 years in that position, and then an extra year outside of the classroom in another school administration position. So I'm glad that you all are here tonight to learn more about the school board, and happy to answer any questions.
Awesome. Thank you, Commissioner Griffin. So I'm going to start with, now I can see you. Oh, wait. Okay, yeah, now I can see you. Awesome. So first question, why is serving on the Board of School Commissioners important?
You want to take it first, Commissioner?
Sure, I'll hop in. So it's important because, one, we need this service for our community. The students in Baltimore City Public Schools are our main priority. And if we as adults and young folks are stepping in to serve our community in this way, we're able to help support our school district in progressing and becoming better and better and better each year, with the feedback from our students and our parents and our educators and our community members, who also do so much to ensure that we are progressing and moving forward. It's also important to serve especially when you think about all the different perspectives that can come around the table, because we need to ensure that we are including all different experiences in Baltimore City as we think about education as it moves forward and we're in this more global society. So service is a huge part of the rent that we pay to live here on this earth, as Lily Mae Carroll Jackson said. And I truly believe that if we put our hands to the plow and serve our communities in the ways that we need it most, that's how we truly can make it better.
I think the only 2 points that I would add on to what Commissioner Griffin offered was that as a district of 76,000 plus students, these are all youth that will be a part of our future workforce development pipeline. So these students, the more that we can bring as a governing body to ensure that resources are allocated appropriately, that professional development exists for our school leaders, teachers, and staff, as well as partnerships exist for these youth to matriculate into college or into the workforce directly out of commencement, directly out of graduation. That is success for us. And this time, of no other time, this is the time of a lot of level setting, a lot of resetting, of establishing what reimagining the world of education can be for students. So the more diverse the board is to bring forth their experiences, their perspectives, their expertises, that would be the intended and unintended positive consequences of a well-balanced school board.
Thank you both. Next question. What qualities are important to be an effective commissioner?
I'll go first, Commissioner. I talk about this all the time. Time management is essential. It is one of the, outside of the required, areas of expertise and all of the requirements of the actual opportunity to serve, having the ability to, one, work in a fast-paced environment times 100. The world of education is consistently changing, overseeing almost 100,000 stakeholders every day. Every day is a day. I would say time management, because most of our board, if not 80% of our board, we still work. We still work full-time jobs. And so understanding the world of governance is governance, but you don't ever want to be so far removed that you don't understand what's happening day to day with the various stakeholders within the system. And when you go to the grocery store, if your neighbors know that you serve on the school board, you're going to hear about it. When I drop my son off at school and pick him up, I hear about it. And so you're never without wearing your school board commissioner hat. But it's having that ability to know when you need to have a hard boundary of, okay, this is home, family life versus this is, time to perform as a school board member. And while there's a myriad of other qualities that I think that school board members should possess, this would be the one that I would dig my feet in the sand under, is having the ability to really understand time management, to understand the work, but to also have time to process it and make meaningful decisions, because you get one vote that you have to stand behind and be able to sleep at night.
Okay. All right.
I can
Commissioner, you have anything to add?
Yeah, I was going to say, I listen 1,000 times yes to what Commissioner Roberts just said. Please, y'all, and take that into account as you think about applying, right? Count up the cost, because this does take a lot of your time, as long as you are dedicating the amount of time that it should take to be a good school board commissioner. In order to serve in the way that I'm sure most of you on this call want to serve, you have to dedicate the time. So I would suggest, as you're thinking about applying, to look at your schedule as it is now. Look at how much time do you actually have to give versus do I have an extra 10, 15 hours a week at least to invest in being a good school board member. Being very realistic about that. The pieces that I would add as far as characteristics, one, you have to be a communicator. Communication is key in this role. Communication is key, is key, is key, is key. And along with communication comes feedback. So you also have to be a person that understands that communication it goes multiple ways. So you may be communicating with other people and other people will communicate with you. And oftentimes that is feedback, and that feedback may be constructive. And so you have to be able to absorb feedback and filter in and filter out what is needed to help make decisions and to hear. The other thing I would say is we definitely need, as school board commissioners, to be inquisitive. We need to understand the power of questions. Questions are so important in our role. If we do not ask good questions, we will not get to the answers and the meat and potatoes and the root issues, right? And so understanding the power of questions and thinking through the questions that you may want to ask or the questions that are coming up for you and how they apply to ensuring that we're getting to student impact. Hands down are some key attributes for school board commissioners.
Commissioner Griffin, you said something and it bubbled up for me because we both just came back from a professional development conference. That is also something that falls kind of is like the hybrid between both of our points of one, time management, because we were not here, we were in California. And so that's time away from work and our family and friends, but also understanding what are some areas that I need to improve on? What are some things that I can bring back to my system and to my board to better us as a whole? And also just networking around the country. There are thousands of other boards, school boards that operate differently. Some are operating the same, but we can all learn from each other. So this is another job opportunity, if you will, just in the form of governance over a school system.
If I could piggyback off that time question, because again, you both kind of said it beautifully. Number one, just again, for members of the public, like Commissioner Griffin said, 10 to 15 hours a week, right, in volunteer time. So that is outside of your full-time job. And I also just want to ask you both, how do you all manage your time? How do you all balance, right, the personal, the work, and school board? How do you all kind of just if you can give some insight into how you both kind of make it all work?
You want the honest answer? Honestly, I don't know what a true healthy balance is for school board work, only because, every day there is something. So I'll use myself as an example. I am just over 2 years on the school board in my first term. I serve as the chair of the operations committee. Everything when you're going through a pandemic for a major urban school system, public school system falls under the purview of operations. And something I don't think is talked about most times is that while you may have an area of expertise, none of us have served on a school board before. So there is a huge learning curve just coming onto the school board and learning just the high level operations of operating a school system. And so there has to be an allotment of learning, understanding I have a learning curve. And as a part of the learning curve, you have to learn all the things that you don't know, just so that you're making informed decisions around the areas that you are overseeing. And so once you get past that, it's, your board commitments for committee service, any other affinity membership groups that you may be a part of for any national organizations like the Council for Urban Boards of Education or the National State Board Association, NSBA, or a myriad of other professional development focused groups. I think that, and I think Commissioner Griffin, she can speak to this too. We're born and raised in Baltimore. And so we have a lot of peers, family members, friends that work in the system. Their parents, their aunts, uncles, children are stakeholders within this district. And so, you can be at the playground, you could be at the grocery store, you could be at Thanksgiving dinner, and city schools becomes a conversation. And so your commissioner hat is back on when you had your Orioles hat on for opening day. And so it's to answer your question, Christian, I'm not particularly sure what a healthy balance is. I think the healthy balance is being an informed commissioner so that you're able to always offer a perspective and take that information and make a meaningful change or implement meaningful change.
If I could jump in, I agree with everything you just said. And I know for me, what helps me, I'm not going to say that this is perfect. I'm not going to say that I get it right every week. I'm not going to say that I have not like had to go back and look at my emails again, or like, oh shoot, let me look at my schedule again. I need to repencil this in. Or my job hasn't put an emergency meeting on my calendar that makes me have to reschedule something, because I work a full-time job, like Commissioner Roberts was saying, and I have to make sure, you know, I have my bread and butter too. I got to live somewhere. And so what I do, and I've had this system for a long time, and it has helped me no matter what capacity I was serving, is I have my digital calendar, right? Most of us utilize a Google Calendar or something, or our Apple Calendar or Gmail Calendar, whatever, and we put our dates and our schedules in there. So I use that to schedule everything. Right now I have about 4 digital calendars I have to look at during the week to make sure I know where I'm supposed to be when. And then I take those 4 calendars, and week by week, I distill them into a handwritten calendar in my little handwritten calendar book, so that I know every hour of the day, where am I supposed to be? What am I supposed to be doing? I can catch conflicts that might come up that I may have missed a week ahead of time, because that's important too, not to double book yourself, not to overpromise yourself. And it also helps me see the ebb and flow of my days, so that I know, okay, the school board has an extra meeting. We have a special session this day. Oh, but this day is very heavy for me when it comes to work or family commitments. I'm not going to be able to make that one, because I need to make sure that I'm in a healthy space when I'm coming into our meetings. And I'm not going to be a hindrance and taking away by just being a person in the room. But I also take the time to block out my time where I know I have executive committee, executive session, public session, my committee meetings, and other meetings that I have tried to schedule at least 3 weeks in advance to commit to. Now I've also taken the practice of putting that on my work calendar. So work is like, oh, okay, we can't schedule with her. So you literally have to juggle the calendars that you have that have already existed, overlay school board on there, ensure there are no conflicts, and keep track of that yourself. If you've had a hard time, I would recommend trying to find a system or adopt a system, because if not, it will not be a healthy balance. Like, you have to identify a system for yourself that you use to keep your schedule straight. And granted, it's not going to be perfect, but it will help you.
Thank you both. So next question, why should someone consider applying now? What will be important about board leadership in the coming years?
I think one of the biggest items that is on the front part of most people's brain right now is the Blueprint for Maryland's Future, the Kerwin bill. That is a historical piece of legislation that will not only, I don't want to say disrupt, but it will completely change the landscape of education for the state of Maryland in terms of funding for public schools. Baltimore City specifically, as a district that has, and that's probably sound like a broken record, but as a district that's been historically underfunded, it will be really important for our system to right size a lot of resources, learning experiences, individual school communities for our students. And so understanding what that looks like for us will be very different than what that looks like for the rest of the state, and what that means like moving forward. That is, I'm not sure if it's even been discussed as much as it should be, because we are a part of we're in the budget cycle right now. I believe, Mr. Gant, the board sees the
April 26th. I'm sorry, April 19th. April 19th.
April 19th, yes, the special session, where that will be our first look at the first inaugural year of Kerwin funding and what that looks like for this year. not being remiss on the fact that we are still very, very much living in a pandemic, and what reentry and all of those variables mean for our school communities and students, what the workforce pipeline looks like for our older students that are in high school. The board, we just set our board goals for the next 3 to 5 years. How are we incorporating that in with some of these really high level, big changes like Kerwin, potentially looking at a search for a superintendent moving forward after 2024, and also being in this casual conversation of the Great Recession amongst the workforce. And so what does that mean as we're integrating in a lot of the added components for what the Kerwin legislation requires, but still operating a school system from day to day, with the resources that we have and the human capital that we have and the facility challenges that we have. So this would be a time, I hope I didn't scare anyone away with that, but those are all really meaningful right now decisions that we're talking about, that we're thinking about when we're at professional development opportunities, talking to other school board members about, how did you all do things? What was your experience like? What can I take from you that will be meaningful for my district? As well as listening to community stakeholders and finding meaningful middle. I think that, going back to even just a skill set, I've always kind of been a meaningful middle person. I think that would be another meaningful skill set to have on this type of board, is a meaningful middle. If you can just get me to the middle, okay, we can't always have one way or the other. Like, what is the most impactful middle that we can get to? Commissioner Griffin.
Yeah. A lot of your points dovetail from mine. And so one of the things that I've been thinking about a lot is just we're in a space of a lot of change, right? And so in the midst of all this change, much of it that has been accelerated because of the pandemic and has caused folks to reimagine their life, their work life. So Great Recession has caused folks to reimagine education because we had to go virtual, right? Many school districts for the first time, certainly us for an entire school district for the first time, and having to think about, what does good education look like? What does it mean for us to have our students go through an education system that they both thrive in and allows them to learn the things that will help them continue to be successful as they move into being adults out here in the world, right? And so I think this time now is really special for joining a board because of the space of change. Whenever there's change, it can be scary, but there are certain types of leaders that deal with that very well, right? And so if you have found that pattern in your life where change has been a thing that you've always just kind of stepped into and had fun working through, this is definitely for you. Change is constant when you work in education, regardless of the time, but it's amplified now even more because of the time that we're in with the pandemic and the influx of money coming from the blueprint, like all of these different changes coming at one time. And another space is thinking about innovation in education, because we're also moving into this difference of understanding technology and how it supports education. What does virtual school mean? What does hybrid school mean? What does it mean for a student to be able to attend classes that are not necessarily in the school building they go to that's physically there? How do you stay connected over a virtual space? Are we talking about Meta? What's going on? So like all of these questions are just coming up. And I find it exciting because that means that we're breaking free of a structure of education that has been in place for way too long, that was never meant to educate Black and brown kids in the first place. It was meant to indoctrinate and assimilate, right? And so because we're pushing that away and we're stepping into, with the support of this funding that's coming in, it's going to have to do some backfilling, but we can also think about how it's going to move us toward progress. Thinking about joining a school board at this time can also be very exciting as well as daunting, but very exciting because we get to face some of these questions head on and make decisions that can positively impact generations to come based on where we are now and where we want to go in the future, which I don't think we've had a chance to really just sit and say we could redo this whole thing if we wanted to, and have that freedom. Yeah.
Thank you both. Final question of the evening. What has been a highlight of your board service?
I visit schools quite frequently. I mean, outside of pick up and drop off most days. I would say that one of the best parts of the school year is commencement. Commencement warms my little heart. It is as soon as you get to the field or to the building of the ceremony and you see the students and they're so excited and you see their families and you just think about the village or the multiple villages that have supported this young scholar, this youth, or the hundreds, thousands of youth throughout their K-12 experience, and they finally have gotten to this rewarding ceremony. It is one of the most fascinating experiences, and it makes a lot of the challenges, a lot of the disagreements, it makes a lot of the work that you feel is tireless and thankless, it makes it all worth it.
I would say two things. One is the school visits. I will often tell folks, like, the thing I miss most about being in a school building are the young people. I do miss their chatter. I miss their sounds. I miss their questions. I miss their nicknames that they have for you. They come up with for you. But just that energy, and being able to see that excitement. So that was something that warmed my heart, was being able to get out again and do school visits. Because I joined right smack dab in the middle of when everything was virtual. And so I didn't even get to, as a school board member, go out to schools until earlier this year, last year. The other thing I would say is when I hear from folks, oh no, it's this one. It's when students have organized and what they would think is against school board members, but they reach out to like talk to folks and get school board opinions. Like sitting and hearing our kids state the reasons why certain policies should pass or why, the school board should consider XYZ. I'm just so proud. I get so proud of them. Like, I don't care if I agree with them or not. It does not matter. You have found a way to get on this calendar to state your opinion and to figure out how to strategize, and I'm here for it. So like that always makes me excited and happy because I know that they have everything that they need to continue to carry the baton forward, to move the district forward, because they're already doing it. Yeah.
Awesome. Thank you both for your time. I hope the audience, I'm almost certain the audience got something helpful from it. So I'm going to turn it back over to Faith. You close this out, or Alexander, you closing this out?
I'll close this out.
Okay.
Awesome. Thank you so much to both Commissioner Roberts and Commissioner Griffin for sharing your experience and for all that you do for our students. And I know I got something out of this session. This was really powerful and really impactful. So thank you both for all of your service. Also, thank you to Christian for providing an overview of the board. Also, thank you to Allie for discussing the application process. And thank you to everyone that joined us for tonight's session. So as we close out, I do want to go over a few housekeeping items. One, we will make sure that the recording of this session is available on our website. So you can go to our website and you'll be able to replay this recording from our website. So if there were others who were not able to make tonight's session, they can always go to our website to watch the session over again. Additionally, Allie and Christian, can you drop your email addresses in the chat, just in case there are some folks that have questions and they weren't able to ask those questions tonight? We do want to offer that opportunity for folks to follow up if there were things that went unanswered this evening. And finally, the applications are open now through May 6th. So you have until May 6th to apply. So I'm going to check the chat really quickly just to see if there's anything that came up as we're closing out. Nope, just a couple of thank yous in the chat. And so with that, I'm going to close us out for the evening. All right. Thank you all.
Thanks, everybody.